The first decisive moment in his spiritual life was connected with his mother, and he described the event as a 72-year-old looking back on his life a year before he died, saying, "Just as the most perfect and complicated structures of the world of the living are due to a germ cell, so also does spiritual growth stem from a germ experience and a germ idea." One day, 68 years ago, when the author was a 4-year-old child, he straightened up and, looking outside the window at the blue sky, presented his mother, without any external cause, the question, "Where is God? Is he in heaven? Is he floating there? Or is he sitting there? Where?" Mother also straightened up and gave the following answer: "God is present everywhere. Like the air is invisible, and yet permeates everything, we live and breathe in her, and thanks to her, so live and breathe our souls in God, and live out of him, and thanks to him." This answer was so enlightening and so convincing that she blew away all difficulties of imagination like a breath, leaving the certainty of the omnipresent, invisible God who is the life of souls. This small thought later grew into the height, into the depth, and into the vastness. It was as if it were the primordial cell from which a widely branched tree of insight and the life of faith grew for decades. With her wonderful answer, his mother also introduced him to the method of analogy that's so indispensable to occult studies, which he must have reflected on, I think, throughout his life. By the time he came under the direct influence of anthroposophy and the tutelage of Rudolf Steiner in his 20s, this was achieved not through face-to-face contact, but by reading books and by an intimate written correspondence. He'd undergone a greater degree of occult initiation than most people could contemplate in several lifetimes. He actually did have an earlier experience. The age of 15. I haven't made a note of it, but when he was 15, he basically had a spiritual awakening when he realised that his life's mission was to do spiritual work, and that was it. He was set on his path. So while he was still in Russia, and from that moment on, he never deviated. And in his communications with Rudolf Steiner, he talks about this, and he's basically asking Rudolf Steiner to take him on as a pupil, as a special pupil. Even though they can't meet, he reveres Steiner as a guru. He finds in anthroposophy what is missing in theosophy, because of course theosophy is not Christ-centered. He's deeply Christian, and he went through Rudolf Steiner's book, I think How to Know Higher Worlds is the title of this book, and he did the book, and he did this for about 10 years, and he kind of proved to himself that it worked.
Have you read that? It was a crucial part of development for me. So when I hear that Tomberg did that, and at such a young age probably, that blows my mind. That blows my mind.
It sort of blows my mind what he did as well, because I think what I was doing at 15.
No kidding, you know?
It's perhaps less well known that Rudolf Steiner might have anticipated Valentin Tomburg in a profound spiritual sense and held him in equally high esteem. This is where we start getting into the circle of 12 and the esoteric side of the story, because there is a school of thought which is that Rudolf Steiner recognized in Tomberg, even though they didn't meet, his heir. That this was the only person capable of fulfilling the mission that he had set out. Mm-hmm. And to put it in a nutshell, the ultimate goal of anthroposophy is to announce and pave the way for the appearance of Christ in the etheric. And that and everything is really towards that goal.
So Steiner becomes the John the Baptist of Tomberg. Isn't that strange to think?
Yeah, and we get into,
what you're doing, the work you're doing is incredibly valuable to put this together, the roadmap for people in the historical setting, because a lot of people who've been in this work or anthroposophical circles or whatever, I bet very few of them know the big picture this way.
Yes, because of course he was suppressed within the mainstream of anthroposophy. And so it was said that he made such great progress in his spiritual development that dark occult groups in Estonia became increasingly aware of him. According to an acquaintance who knew them both, they wanted to use him as a tool for their dark purposes. Who might they have been? It's not said, but I think it's likely they were on the Red Russian side, because that was a deeply occult movement. The acquaintance, who is not mentioned by name, gave Tomberg more details about the plan of the order that observed him as actually an order, as well as about other people who were also to serve the purpose of this order. Of these people, only Tomberg was a member of the Anthroposophical Society, and he wrote a letter to Marie Steiner. He became very concerned about this. He took it seriously. He wrote to Marie Steiner. This is what he said. "It was said of me alone that I am a person who has not yet recognized his opportunities, but who, when he recognizes them, will hinder our cause in Russia, our being the Dark Order. Now he's being taught by Dr. Steiner. But if he succeeds in establishing a connection with that spiritual entity behind anthroposophy, if he becomes its tool, then he will be able to seriously harm us. Further, my acquaintance told me what he was told, which is that if someone bothers us, the Dark Order, then we warn him. If the warning does not work, then we tear out his mental center, and after 5 to 6 months, he will go crazy. My acquaintance also informed me that in his opinion, although he can't prove it, they really could threaten me with such a danger. In his opinion, they form a chain, and by themselves, gathering at rhythmic intervals, they direct their united forces of thought and will to anyone they choose." I mean, that to me is a penny drop moment.
Oh my God.
I know, because there you see why it happened. Why, you know, if they people did these things. The Bolshevik Revolution. You know, Stalin was a former priest. When he came later, Lenin was a 33-degree Mason. These were true black magicians. Now, if they recognised being close to him physically, Tomberg, as being the person that, he's perhaps mooted to be somebody who is, of such spiritual import that he could thwart the whole of the Bolshevik movement, then they're certainly capable of targeting this person. And of course, he did end up being ejected from the Anthroposophical Society and severed from this spiritual being behind anthroposophy, which then became subverted. So I saw that as a real, okay, this is how we solve going back. I know.
That's mind-blowing. And the thing is that people, your average person who studies history, do you think that they think much about the forces behind some of the events in history, the figures who appear in history? Do you think they're thinking much about the occult forces here? And people just, it's interesting, Charlotte, to me that people shy away from this. They really do. People are usually like, oh, I don't want to, that's evil stuff. I don't want to talk or think about that. Why is it that so much of this has been veiled from us to the point where we just want to not know about it? It becomes we become blindsided because we are trained or indoctrinated in some way to think, oh, don't look at those people behind the curtain over there. Just don't do that, because that will just derail our whole story.
There is deep-seated genetic trauma from inquisitions and feudal systems and relentless wars.
Yeah.
He began to do more of his own independent work rather than just repeat the words of Rudolf Steiner. He advanced the work, took on anthroposophy, and did his own independent spiritual investigations. Even though he said he owed everything to Rudolf Steiner, his followers were now asking him, they recognized what he was, and they said, we want to hear your words now. And so he started to publish lectures of his own, all within anthroposophy, but this started to attract attention, and it got, and also the Anthroposophical Society was beginning to split anyway, between the ones who just wanted to stick like glue to Rudolf Steiner, who in their eyes was the end of the initiates, the last word, and the others who said, well, actually, we need to prepare the way for Christ in the etheric. Tomberg began to publish, this is by the group that sort of followed him, 1933, his Old Testament studies, which are published in Christ and Sophia.
Oh my goodness.
Christ in the Etheric is in here, so they've collated this, and it's fantastic, this book, and under his own name as well.
Oh my gosh, I've never seen that before.
Oh, this is an amazing book. You'd love this.
No, absolutely.
That's the anthroposophical companion to meditations, really. So he began to publish these works, which started to blow minds, because, you know, I mean, if you've read The Return of Christ in the Etheric, that is the masterwork of anthroposophy. It's the pinnacle. It's kind of like, you know, this is it, folks. This is what
right.
we've been.
Steiner, Christ as mystical fact and all that, right?
Oh yeah, but you know that Tomberg produced The Return of Christ in the Etheric. Tomberg produced The Return of Christ in the Etheric. That was his.
Oh, okay.
Right. So he began to produce lectures, which were so good that when he first wrote The Return of Christ in the Etheric, at first people believed Rudolf Steiner had written it.
Wow.
And they started saying, oh, here's the lost work of the master. When it turned out to be Valentin Tomburg, that was cognitive dissonance of a level that they weren't ready for. So having been attacked by the Dark Occult group in Estonia, they were now under attack from within anthroposophy in a very serious way. An observer of the situation wrote, this is when it finally all came to a head, "It is namelessly sad to see how lonely and alone Mr. Tomberg now stands. 10 years of unselfish, dedicated work in which he, with all his being, gave himself to this much-loved work. This work was everything to him, a vital necessity to himself. Whole streams of spirit have flowed into our lives through him. And what is our thanks? He gave himself to us entirely. Yes, he thanks us so often that he was allowed to work with us and amongst us. And we have let him go, without thanks, without trust, only criticism, accusations, and personal petty settlements in the heart. He stands alone. A very small circle of friends surrounds him, in firm confidence that all accusations of malice and falsehood are based on untruths. It is not true that Mr. and Mrs. Tomberg are teaching their own esoteric doctrines. It is untrue that they failed to work in the spirit of Rudolf Steiner. With their hearts they see how dark forces are tirelessly at work, poisoning the great general anthroposophical society and the work of Rudolf Steiner. I often have the feeling that Mr. Tomberg, here in the lonely far northeast, resembles our hard granite blocks at which surging, foaming waters are thrown. In order to continue, he has to be a hard rock, but he is at his lowest ebb. True and true to the deepest soul is at his side his wife, who supports him through illness, through slander, and through indescribable wants and shattering worries, unspeakably lonely, from daily heavy burdens plagued. It becomes serious work now. He wrote to his friend Maria Lichtmes in Amsterdam about the building of an ark. He said, this is actually quite telling because they've just had a flood in Germany, a terrible flood.
Yes.
He said, awful. In the present day, we are experiencing the rise of an overpowering evil, a kind of flood. The awakening of evil is an inundation. It is directly at work in everyday consciousness. In such a flood, it is a case of sink or swim. This is the trial which consciousness is undergoing. Rescue, however, comes from the principle of an ark. What is it to build an ark? It is to build in consciousness a four-square edifice whose length, breadth and height are such that they can contain everything in the whole expanse of life. All cultural values and truths are to be gathered and conserved in extract. Unextinguished recollection of everything essential in the good and true. This is the life raft which will prevent us from drowning. Now, when the darkness has come up over humanity's head, it is a question of carrying the ark in one's consciousness, that is, of remembering all the essential values of culture. The result of this is that man will not wither in the life of his soul, his spiritual body. He will remain alive with his soul. From the carrying of the ark of recollection within come faith, hope and love. When a truth has become so strong that it enters in our spiritual body, it becomes faith, hope and love. So here we see one of Tomberg's key concerns from the second half of his life, which is that the thread of tradition is not to be broken. And that's why we have the synthesis work of meditations at the end of his life. But rather, all that is true and precious in the history of mankind is to be collected and grasped in its wisdom and depth. only on this basis is it possible to plant new, strong impulses in history.
I think putting minds together right now to create this arc of the tradition, I think that's what we're being asked to do. It's an arc of consciousness that we need to gather together right now and put together what we have so far, so that maybe there can be an intuitive leap.
We've had it, put to us plainly that a black occult group was trying to destroy the work of Tomburg, actually him personally, and that this could well have been why the Anthroposophical Society, this gives them their lifeline in a way, because they've nailed themselves as a group into almost a tomb with Rudolf Steiner by rejecting, in my opinion, Valentin Tomburg, who even if they didn't have to believe he was the heir of Rudolf Steiner, why reject such a wonderful soul from the circle, when the work they're doing is so great? I mean, okay, karmically, you can also argue that it was his destiny to also go into the Catholic Church and embrace the Hermetic path, so everything happens for a reason. But maybe it's time to be reconciled, because some of the key figures who were against him have since passed on now.
And there are younger students of Steiner that are out there that I think need to be brought to. I know personally of some that are very deeply into studying Robert Sardello and other people in the anthroposophical movement.
Yeah, I'll speak to some people that I know as well and see if they would like to. I mean, a lot of them are very hermetic types, don't like any attention, but we'll see. We should at least ask.
They dare, and they like to be silent. Yes. I understand, but I think this needs to be done now. I think that there is obviously some sort of impulse that we're riding, and I'm so honored that you've come forward, and that, I mean, I feel almost completely out of my depths. It's just absolutely, I'm honored that we have opened up this window, this wormhole of sorts, and I just hope that we can build on it.